convene our meeting. Can everyone hear me? Okay, great, thanks. Okay, we're going to return to our agenda on risk mitigation strategies. And for that, I'll call on Ms. Green.
Thank you, President Jones and members of the board. Marta Green, CalPERS team member. I'm pleased to be bringing this risk mitigation strategy discussion to you today. Before I get into today's agenda, I first want to make sure that my other two panelists are on and then introduce them. So can I verify that Mr. Dave Moody and Clay Levester are in fact on or promoted to speakers?
Yeah, hi, this is Dave. I'm on.
Hi, Dave. Clay? Clay, if you said anything, I can't hear you.
I don't see Mr. Levester.
Not yet, okay.
Not yet. Do we know if he's in phone number, perhaps? I see some phone numbers in here. Check those real quick.
Hold on just one moment.
I just checked to see. I haven't heard back yet if he is logging in.
Give it just one more minute and then we'll jump in. Well, I'll go ahead and do introductions and maybe that will give Clay just a moment to go ahead and get connected in case he's having any technical difficulties.
Okay, so he's muted. I'm sorry, Marta. He's muted by the host, so he needs to be unmuted.
Is he on a telephone number? Does he need to disclose his telephone number? Got it?
Got him.
Great. Thank you so much. So I'll start with Dave. Dave Moody is a partner at Mercer based out of the San Francisco office. He has served as one of Mercer's lead health program actuaries for the CalPERS account for the last 2 years. With more than 22 years experience in the employee benefits consulting industry, he has considerable experience with the overall strategic design and ongoing financial management of employer-provided health and welfare benefit plans. And Clay is a principal and senior consultant in the Mercer's Los Angeles office. Clay has 24 years of experience in the healthcare consulting industry. He has a wide expertise as a senior consultant, including strategic planning, plan design, vendor selection, budget projections, funding mechanisms, and renewal negotiations. He has worked with corporations and public entities of varied sizes, with extensive consulting on financial projections and funding mechanisms. Next slide, please. So here's today's agenda. I'm going to give you some background on the CalPERS Health Program and its various risk adjustment programs, with which many of you are intimately aware, but just as a little bit of a refresher. We will discuss the challenges the portfolio is facing related to risk concentration, risk pool fragmentation, and adverse selection, and our analysis of the possible solutions to explore. We will review our project timeline, and then we will look at the impacts, benefits, and risks of implementing a risk mitigation strategy. Next slide, please. First, let me give you a brief overview of the CalPERS Health Benefits Program, although I'm sure you're very familiar with all of these facts and figures. CalPERS collects approximately $10 billion in health premiums each year to provide health coverage for 1.5 million active members, retirees, and dependents. We are the second largest purchaser of health coverage in California, with Medi-Cal being the largest purchaser and Covered California being the third. We are the largest purchaser on behalf of employees in California. Our membership consists of 60% state employees and their dependents and 40% public agency employees and their dependents. We currently offer 12 HMO and 3 PPO plans in our portfolio of basic health plans. Our plan portfolio offers a menu of different cost-sharing obligations, benefit designs, and provider network choices to accommodate geographic location and members' purchasing preferences. I'll get more into this later, but this choice is what is driving risk fragmentation in our health portfolio. Clay?
One comment I would like to make is that CalPERS has made a choice to offer many options. Most plan sponsors offer 1 or 2 plan choices. The largest plan sponsors often provide 2 or more plans, and if geographically dispersed, may offer more than 1 carrier, balancing between choice and local market dynamics. Given the diversity of CalPERS populations, it makes sense to offer a broad array of options, but that does make managing risk across the overall portfolio more challenging.
Next slide, please. So I'll touch briefly on the previous risk adjustment approach. As you know, we had a risk adjustment program that began in 2014. The health program was facing some of the same challenges we face today, and the team had hoped that risk adjusting would encourage health plans to compete on the basis of medical and administrative efficiency and quality of care rather than their ability to select low risk, healthy members. Further, risk adjustment was discussed as a way to control cost trend, provide better data transparency, and better disease management. However, due to the complexity of the lengthy four-stage risk adjustment process and the lack of transparency with the model that was used, the results were problematic. There was unexpected member migration driven by network changes and other issues, and this, combined with the complex risk adjustment process, caused very significant administrative burden and challenges in premium setting. Consequently, CalPERS ended risk adjustment in 2019.
We work with a number of large plan sponsors that use similar risk adjustment approaches. What we have found is that overly complex, opaque models are difficult to manage and can result in extreme results in volatility. A simple, transparent model applied to the entire portfolio with the ability to manage extreme results makes it easier to maintain a stable program with less manipulation by the health plans.
Next slide, please. So when risk adjustment ended, the basic health plan's premiums were impacted in relation to the level of population health risk within them. Plans with high population health risk, which had premiums reduced through risk adjustment, experienced significantly high premium increases. Conversely, plans with low population health risks experienced significant decreases in their premiums. These premium changes triggered very large member migration among the plans, where the low-cost narrow network plans attracted members who required minimal health care. As members migrated to lower-cost options, more expensive plans retained a greater proportion of high-cost members with more relative healthcare needs. The differences in concentration of high and low health risk between the plans in our portfolio resulted in a disparity in premiums that did not reflect the product's value. To put it simply, our plans are no longer predominantly priced based on the value of the benefit design and network. The concentration of healthy or unhealthy lives in the plan is the largest driver of the plan's premiums. As premiums in the high-risk plans increased, members in these plans were required to either regularly assume a greater financial burden or leave the health plan. As a result, several of our plans are in what's called a death spiral, as I talked about this morning. We've used buy-downs in the rate-setting process to attempt to shield the portfolio and the membership from the effects of adverse selection. However, without intervention, at some point, some of these plans will not be viable.
Earlier in my career, I worked with a large plan sponsor that offered two health plans, a high plan and a low plan. And as you would expect, and as we see within the CalPERS portfolio, the high plan had most of the high cost and high risk participants. But because the two plans were rated together as a single pool, the premium increases for both plans were reasonable, and migration between the two plans was fairly stable. At some point, the client requested that we rate each plan individually based on its own experience. We advised against this change due to the likelihood of increased volatility, but the client insisted. Over the next 2 years, high plan rate increases were substantial, causing many of the high plan enrollees to migrate to the low plan, resulting in the high plan becoming even more unaffordable as the higher cost or highest cost and highest risk employees remained in the high plan. The high plan was soon at the end of its death spiral. We tried to fix this affordability issue for a couple of years, but were unable to do much without significantly impacting both high and low plan enrollees. At the end, the employer discontinued the high plan and introduced a new plan alongside the low plan. And in an effort to reduce the likelihood of a death spiral, we returned to the practice of rating the entire portfolio as one single pool. One reason I bring up that example is that that's a very simple, straightforward portfolio. And if you don't work at mitigating risk, it is possible that one of your plans would go into a death spiral. So if we look at the CalPERS portfolio, which is much more complex, we have a few plans that could be considered to be in a death spiral, including PERS Care, the traditional HMO through Anthem, and Blue Shield Access Plus. I want to take a look at just the Blue Shield Access Plus plan and what's happened since 2018. So we eliminated the risk adjustment for the 2019 plan year, and we would have had a 21.3% increase in the premium. But to mitigate this, we used $99 million of their account to buy down the rate, and we also exited, or Blue Shield exited 8 Bay Area counties, and that brought down the increase from 21.3% to 6.2%. The average CalPERS HMO increase was only 0.4%, so we're still much higher than the average across the portfolio. And then from 2019 to 2020, the rate increase was 13.9%, and our average HMO increase was only 6%. For 2021, Blue Shield proposed a 7.96% increase, and the premium increase was reduced down to 3.16%, but we used up 70% of the healthcare fund surplus, or $38 million. That 7.96% increase still is higher than our average HMO increase of 4.4%. And in addition to these rate increases, what we also saw, we saw a big shift in enrollment from 2018 to 2020. In 2018, there were 167,000 members enrolled in the plan. In 2019, the enrollment dropped about 25% to 126,000. And in 2020, enrollment dropped another 25% to 94,000. So from 2018 to 2020, enrollment dropped about 43%. At some point in the near future, the Access Plus plan will become unaffordable for many members and unsustainable.
Next slide, please.
Yeah, so when you discuss the concept of insurance, you're really discussing the concept of pooling risk. And risk pooling is the fundamental of an insurance program. So risk pool is formed to protect members of the pool from catastrophic loss and to provide an avenue for people to access insurance. Each member pays a small amount into the pool so that if they incur a large or catastrophic expense, the risk pool pays the expense. In essence, each member is responsible for a share of the pool's risk profile, but not his or her own risk profile. Pooling also protects the pool's sustainability. Social Security, Medicare, Covered California are all examples of risk pools, and the CalPERS health plan portfolio would be considered a fragmented pool. Each health plan is rated individually based upon its own membership and experience, and each plan is responsible for its own experiences results. The risk is not currently shared across the portfolio. Social Security is considered a single risk pool with no fragmentation. Medicare, Medicaid, and Covered California would be considered fragmented risk pools that manage the negative risk fragmentation by using risk adjusting. Creating and maintaining a stable portfolio by managing risk is a fiduciary responsibility, most easily achieved by forming a large risk pool versus fragmented risk pools.
I'd just like to briefly add some public policy perspective on the issue of risk pooling and medical underwriting from my professional background and experience. I've been working for the last 15 years on ensuring access to health coverage for all Californians, having worked on a prior governor's healthcare reform proposal and then implementing the Affordable Care Act in California using many of the same principles. Before the Affordable Care Act, health plans were allowed to price their products or refuse to sell them altogether based on an individual's health status. This was both unfair to the individual and bad from a public policy perspective. The pre-Affordable Care Act approach to managing healthcare costs through risk avoidance led to many, many problems: medical bankruptcy, job lock, care being delivered in the wrong setting, or care being avoided altogether due to lack of coverage. Furthermore, chasing good risk incentivized plans to exclude providers that are well recognized for treating expensive conditions like cancer, HIV/AIDS, and some serious mental health conditions. If plans are not incentivized to chase good risk, then they are incentivized to appropriately care for the members that they have. The approach the Affordable Care Act took to address the issue had multiple prongs, but the two most relevant to today's discussion were to forbid plans from pricing their products based on an individual's health status and risk adjusting between the plans on the individual and small group markets to combat the negative effects of risk fragmentation and adverse selection. Allowing our risk pool to continue to fragment and pricing to be directly tied to the health status of each product's membership is moving backwards from a public policy perspective. Next slide, please.
So adverse selection is the propensity of people to choose a health plan based upon their own self-interest by using the knowledge of their expected future healthcare utilization. Given members usually choose between price and brand, we often see unhealthy risk using brand to identify providers of needed care and healthy risk looking for the lowest price. When we fragment risk pools, we open ourselves to the impact of adverse selection. Each fragmented risk pool may be selected against, either positively or negatively. And when an individual plan covers a high proportion of high-risk, high-cost members with no risk mitigation strategy, the leveraged anti-selection is unsustainable.
So I've already touched on the public policy implications of risk pool fragmentation and adverse selection. So here I'll just add that adverse selection incentivizes all of the wrong health plan behaviors and disincentivizes all the right ones. Further, all of the important work that Don and Dr. Daphne just discussed today regarding using our purchasing power to drive competition in the healthcare market is predicated on a stable portfolio. If health plans are chasing good risk and avoiding bad risk, their geographic footprints will not be aligned to our competition strategy. This is most evidenced by Blue Shield's exit from the Bay Area to try to control costs due to risk concentration in its products. As long as unmitigated adverse selection is occurring in the portfolio, many of the innovative initiatives we're contemplating will be unachievable. Next slide, please. Risk mitigation is an effective tool for pricing health plan premiums on value rather than pricing on risk. This strategy would reduce premium volatility in the high and low risk plans by minimizing the effect of member migration on premium. When risk is managed across an entire portfolio, there's much greater opportunity to encourage competition and reward plan quality and efficiency. Risk mitigation also allows us greater flexibility in contracting and funding arrangements with the plans and allows for greater choice of health plans, delivery, and network models. Next slide, please.
There are a variety of ways that purchasers can mitigate and manage risk. Larger size entities have greater flexibility with larger consolidated pools and a broader available spectrum of alternative funding arrangements. Larger purchasers with greater risk tolerance have more tools at their disposal to effectively manage risk rather than transfer all risk to another entity. Here are several risk mitigation approaches to consider. We can continue to use buy downs to manage each plan's rate increases. This approach is imprecise and is contingent on reserves being available. Looking at the Blue Shield Access Plan for the 2021 plan year, we used $38 million of the surplus, leaving only $17 million in the future, for the future. As we run out of available funds for a specific plan, we will see rate snapbacks, resulting in potentially significant increases. Really, the only way to sustain this approach is to add a load to each plan's rates to maintain the reserves, which would then be used to moderate future plan increases for those plans that need it. Another option to consider would be to reduce plan or provider choice within the portfolio. Under this approach, we would reduce the number of plans offered, creating larger risk pools and reducing volatility within each risk pool. Member choice would be limited, and some high-quality health plans or systems would need to be excluded. By limiting choice and increasing the size of the risk pools, we would be reducing the likelihood and impact of adverse selection on an individual plan. We could also look at purchasing or implementing a reinsurance program. Reinsurance programs protect the financial stability of the entire portfolio by limiting the impact of truly catastrophic claims. But because it is difficult to predict when a catastrophic claim will occur and under which plan it will fall, reinsurance provides limited protection for an individual plan. A reinsurance program will not fully protect a risk pool or an individual plan from the impact of adverse selection. Each plan will continue to be priced based on the risk profile of its members and not on the value of the plan that the plan provides. But a reinsurance program can be used in conjunction with other risk mitigation strategies to manage the risk of the entire portfolio, especially as we see increased incidents of $1 million or more catastrophic claims. The last approach to consider is to incorporate a risk adjustment methodology across the entire portfolio. The objective of this approach is to discourage plans from chasing better or healthier risks and to encourage plans to compete on value and quality. We want to reward the plans that manage care and costs effectively, regardless of the risk profile of their membership.
So out of the various risk mitigation approaches Mercer just walked through, not all strategies are truly suitable for the CalPERS Health Program. As we mentioned previously, premium buy downs were used for some plans to mitigate the high premium increases due to the removal of risk adjustment. This is not a long-term solution to the problem, and as Mercer indicated, there is no guarantee that excess reserve funds would be available to support this on an ongoing basis. The most extreme version of reducing plan choice down to a single plan would negate all impacts of adverse selection and risk fragmentation. But this would also remove all member choice and preference, as well as excluding many of the high-performing health plans that we have in our portfolio. Further, as Dawn and Dr. Daphne discussed today, we are conducting a competition study to formulate the right amount of competition between health plans and providers in each geographic location to ensure the best pricing of our program. Also, given the quantity of capitation in our portfolio and the randomness of large fee-for-service claims experience in our portfolio of plans, reinsurance is also not a reliable method to achieve stability in the basic program. Additionally, this method would not address the greater concerns of adverse selection, where plan pricing would still be largely affected by population health risk. But as Dave mentioned, it may have an appropriate role to play in our overall risk mitigation strategy. The fourth and final approach, which we'll discuss more in a moment, is removing risk from pricing and thereby creating a single risk pool. Next slide, please.
So by incorporating a risk adjustment program, we would price each plan option based on the risk of the entire portfolio and not based on the risk profile of each individual plan. By doing this, we would have the ability to design incentives so that each plan could focus on value, quality, and efficiency to meet the needs of a diverse population. Instead of chasing healthier risks, each plan would be able to focus on their core mission, providing high-quality care efficiently and effectively. In order to avoid the issues of the prior model, we believe we need to focus on a few key principles. First, any risk adjustment methodology needs to be known and broadly accepted. The HHS and CMS risk adjuster models meet this criteria. The HHS model is used by Covered California, and the CMS model is used for Medicare Advantage programs. And most carriers would be familiar with both models. Second, the methodology needs to be transparent to all stakeholders. We need to avoid a black box. The program needs to be communicated to and understood by all stakeholders, including the health plans, so that we can avoid confusion and misunderstanding. Third, we would need to develop a straightforward approach, one that is easy to understand, timely, and streamlined. Under the prior model, it could take up to 1 year after the end of the plan year to finalize the risk adjustment process. And while you're finalizing that plan year, you've already started a new plan year and you're negotiating for the next plan year. I would imagine that would be pretty confusing for the health plans and all the stakeholders.
Next slide, please. So here's our project plan and timeline. We are working with our internal and consulting actuaries to develop options for risk mitigation approaches for the CalPERS program. We're currently reviewing risk mitigation approaches, risk adjustment models, and portfolio rating alternatives to incorporate into such a strategy. A list of options with modeling on how they would impact the portfolio will be presented at the September PHBC meeting for discussion and in November PHBC for approval. Any approved changes would be reflected in the 2022 rate development process. Next slide, please. Implementing a risk mitigation strategy within our basic plan portfolio would have an overall budget neutral outcome. While individual plan premiums would be impacted, the overall portfolio would remain the same. Based on the modeling of the impacts to individual plan premiums, a phased-in approach could be considered. Next slide, please. Without an appropriate risk mitigation strategy in place, plans are incentivized to focus on reducing healthcare costs by exiting high-cost areas, removing high-cost and high-value providers from their network, and introducing low-cost and narrow network alternatives rather than managing care appropriately and increasing the quality of care to our members. The initial implementation of risk mitigation would likely result in premium adjustments. However, risk mitigation would allow CalPERS to negotiate with our carriers based on value and quality of care provided. Implementing a risk mitigation strategy will reduce adverse selection, risk fragmentation, the concentration of risk, and year-over-year premium volatility within our basic plan portfolio. We look forward to bringing you specific options for your consideration in September. With that, we're happy to take any questions you may have.
Yes, we have a question, Ms. Green-Ross.
Just back on the reinsurance, as I understand the explanation, it can only sort of help globally with the entire program. So it's kind of like our reserve by plan, but more broad. And I'm guessing with this pandemic, which seems like it could be a catastrophic situation, it's probably now overpriced.
Yeah, we've had a number of conversations recently about reinsurance given the pandemic. I think we all feel pretty fortunate that we're not a reinsurer right now, that we aren't the reinsurance provider for our own claims, because then we could bear the brunt of some very expensive ICU claims. That's part of the issue, is they are random, but they're less random in a pandemic because they affect a lot more people.
Right, right.
And so on an ongoing basis, if you think about risk concentration, it's not just those single catastrophic high cost issues, but also those individuals that need more routine care. I think about kids with autism and they get ABA therapies, right? No single ABA claim is very large, but taken over a plan year, that's a significant claim load. So if you get a concentration of members like that, where they have individual healthcare needs, but not these big catastrophic claims, many reinsurance programs don't address that form of risk concentration, which is why it can help, but it is not a complete solution. I don't know if Dave or Clay, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I can add one thing. Usually when you're looking at reinsurance, you're trying to protect the entire portfolio. And so for a private employer, they would be looking at wanting to make sure that a large claim isn't going to blow up their financials. And that's a situation we probably need to think about also, but it's more for the whole portfolio and not for an individual plan. So.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Marta, for the presentation. So I had a couple of questions. So the risk mitigation strategies, you're saying that it would take risk out of the formula, right? But my question is, don't most plans figure their rates based on risk anyway? I mean, okay, so when they come to us, they've already looked at, okay, we've got a whole bunch of old people, so these are what our rates are going to be.
So that's one of the great improvements we made in the pricing and the negotiation strategy that we implemented for the 2021 plan year. So by standardizing the methodology, the plans now submit rates that attribute each component of the rate to risk, to changes in the provider mix. So this could be, you get an infusion of lower cost providers. It could be capitation versus fee for service, and also where the geographic concentration of your membership lives, because that has a cost component as well. So we are able to identify the specific portion of the premium that is attributable to risk. And so if you look at the presentation I did back in June, for each health plan on each slide, I gave its risk score. So, and that is indicating how far away from neutral risk being expressed as a 1, how far away from that plan was priced, and how much of that premium is attributable to its risk score. So we can actually identify that through the work that we've done with our own data.
So when I got on the board kind of right at the beginning of the risk strategy, and then I was there for ending it. So we still had increasing rates the whole time. So you heard me before, so I'm not sure the benefit of this, but I was wondering, and I don't remember which one of you, if it was Dave or Ernest, but somebody was talking about reducing the plans, right? I think it was Dave, but anyway, so they had 2 plans, and then when the strategy, when the prices went up in the one plan, then the other plan, which was a narrow network, got more people, and then that plan went into a death spiral. I'm trying to, before I got on the board, and Henry and Rob, you guys probably remember this, we had, I think, Blue Shield, Kaiser, and then our PPO plan. So we had 2 HMOs and then our PPO plan. Not to say that rates didn't go up astronomically at that point, but what would that do in terms of giving them the ability? Because I'm not sure competition works in healthcare. I keep hearing competition. I'm not sure competition works. It doesn't seem to. We've got 50 million plans and it hasn't worked. So prices keep going up. So I'm wondering if we had some decent HMOs and then our PPO plan and then risk adjusted, would that work? Would that help? These are questions I just had in my head.
No,
comment?
go ahead, Clay, and then I'll jump in.
Okay, so as we heard before, there's a lot of dynamics going on. I think what we're really trying to get at is reducing the anti-selection of what we've heard about people picking Access Plus or unhealthy people picking plans, and taking that bad risk out of the premium rates that people see. So they're no longer making a choice just based upon Access Plus going up at a very, very high rate or having a large contribution. And so by doing that, we should then reduce the migration or selection against plans, and that should give us an opportunity to focus on the other value components, like, what is the network structure? Are they HMOs with capitated arrangements or fee for service? But without taking out that risk component, we're always seeing this leveraging impact on those plan premium rates.
Right. I would just add that risk mitigation is not on its own going to solve the cost challenge. Risk mitigation stabilizes the portfolio so that we can then implement strategies to manage costs, because risk concentration itself is just shifting the burden to a smaller group of people to manage a larger proportion of the costs relative to their health status, and then shifting the burden away from healthy members who concentrate in plans that have healthier lives. And so all it is doing is spreading the risk amongst the membership and disincentivizing inappropriate plan behavior regarding tailoring networks or benefit designs to discourage unhealthy members from selecting their plan, because those strategies are not good for our membership at all.
Yeah, but so the way we were told that this was working, and maybe this plan that you guys are looking at implementing is different, was that it was making some of our plans pay a lot more for unhealthier lives in the Blue Shield plan. Say it's Blue Shield. I'm not saying that, but just say it's Blue Shield and Western Health Advantage, right? So Western Health Advantage has all our healthy people, and Blue Shield has all our sick people. What you're doing is what was explained to us as the reason why we stopped this was you were spreading this risk out unfairly on these healthy people who then had to have increasing rates at a level that they shouldn't have to take care of these sick people in this plan, which then, yeah, it keeps them from moving, more people from moving, but are you helping a plan that shouldn't even be there, if that's the problem?
So the issue in the price differentials that we see today, and I think that we saw in 2014 when risk adjustment was implemented, is that the prices are not driven by benefit design or network differentials. As they are currently priced, risk is the single largest driver of the differential amongst the plans. So what risk mitigation would do would ensure that the price differences in the plan reflect the differences in the benefit designs and the networks. Broad networks and rich benefit designs would remain more expensive, while narrower networks and less rich benefit designs would remain cheaper. The risk neutral premiums reflect the actual unit cost of care in the plans and not the health status of its membership. And this kind of fundamentally gets to the entire purpose of insurance and risk pooling, like pensions, is to spread risk. And so, as I said in my presentation, The other approach to mitigating risk fragmentation is to reduce choice, but it has many negative consequences. And is the example that Dave gave of going even down to 2 plans. I mean, imagine CalPERS only having 2 plans, a single PPO and a single HMO. They still had adverse selection with his client, and they still lost one of those 2 plans. So even reducing plan choice is not going to entirely mitigate risk fragmentation. It may be a portion of the solution, but in and of itself, it won't mitigate risk fully.
And I would just add, if you went with a statewide PPO, you might find that the underlying contractual rates might not be as favorable as an HMO. So while there might be consolidation of risk, the underlying contractual arrangements will also come into play.
Right. So unit costs could go up under that scenario.
And then, Marta, what would be the difference between what you guys are looking at right now for risk mitigation and what we have?
So
I'm not clear on that right
now. So a number of key things that we think were problematic from the prior approach. The first is that the risk adjustment process and model that was used was not transparent. So it created unexpected results for CalPERS, unexpected results for the carriers, and it was difficult for the stakeholders to understand. It also had a complicated 4-stage process that included all sorts of different true-ups at different intervals, which made it complex and also created complicated results. So what we're proposing here is instead a portfolio rating alternative that endeavors to remove risk from the initial premium setting and not creating a bunch of complicated risk transfer mechanisms on the back ends with our health plans. Our existing contractual relationships with our health plans would remain the same.
Still not able to wrap my head around what that means. I'm sure you'll come to us with that.
That's what we're going to model for September, and you can specifically see how it works, what the impacts would be on various plans, and think. It's hard to talk about in the abstract because they are complicated processes, but we plan to model it fully for you so you can make an informed choice.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Brown.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Jones. I have to say that, I was unhappy when we eliminated risk adjustment, but then based on discussions we've had as a board with our attorneys, I understand why we needed to eliminate it. So I'm very hopeful that this new way we're going to do risk adjustment as a for the full portfolio will help us with those obstacles and eliminate the adverse selection. But I do agree with Ms. Taylor on the question about what is it going to do to our lower cost plans, because I think those would, that's on my phone, I think those would naturally increase. My guess is you've probably already ran this model, Marta, and you probably don't want to give us the answer, but maybe I'll ask the Mercer people, so I'll save you from doing this. But based on their knowledge and experience, what kind of increases could we see generally from our lowest cost plans? Do we have an idea what that might be?
Well, we haven't really finalized the model, the approach, and or whether or not it would be phased in over time. But we have seen from what the CalPERS data currently shows is that there are some large spreads of the risk adjusters. And so, I think the current data was showing spreads plus or minus 20, 30%. One would not utilize the full amount when starting. And then the other consideration, might be things regarding the size of a plan and stuff like that. So we haven't really finished it all out yet, but there's a lot of moving parts.
All right. And then, Marta, I think it probably would be helpful, like Teresa was saying, it's kind of hard to, wrap your arms around this because we actually haven't seen how the sausage is made. I mean, we haven't actually seen how you get those costs of what the premium should be. And so I didn't know that there was a line for risk or there was all these other things. So I think when you come back to us, if it needs to be confidential, that's fine too. But I think when you come back to us, if you can show us how those look, I think it will help those of us who haven't done this all our lives understand this a little better.
Absolutely. Happy
Great.
to.
Thank you. I'm done.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Rubalcaba?
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Thank you. I appreciate the presentation. I've always wondered why, when I came on the board, the decision, I think the risk adjustment was about to be gone or was gone. I think I voted for it. I can't remember. But I never understood why it was about why. Let me start again. Sorry, Mr. Jones.
It's okay. Take your time.
Okay, no, let me start again. I just want to say thank you for explaining to me why the problems with the old process. I think that's the best way to start because I never understood why we went from a big risk pool to fragmented. I think that's a new term they use, risk fragmented. Because as Clay from Mercer said, my experience has always been where it's not only one or two plants. I always heard that, overlapping networks was not a good thing because it splits up the risk pool. And similarly to, it's sort of something Ms. Olivares said earlier, that insurance companies don't provide health care. They contract with providers that do. And so the premium many times is driven by what kind of contracts they can get with the same hospital, with the same medical group, and that's what drives them to perhaps purchase or consolidate with medical groups or hospitals, what have you. So I appreciate the discussion, and I'm looking forward to a little bit more of this, understand a little bit more of the risk mitigation, because I am too concerned about the impact on the lower price plans, and also the example that Merce also raised about when they had a high and low. I'm not sure I support premium cross subsidy, for lack of a better word, where perhaps one population subsidizes another population. But I'll hold judgment to understand a little bit better. Because in your PowerPoint, you mentioned how other entities, for example, California, also have the risk adjustment. And my question was going to do, how do they work? How do they do it differently? They won't have the same result that CalPERS had. But now that you explained what was programmatic about that one, maybe I now understand a little bit better. But I had one more question. On the one of the PowerPoints talks about a choice of health plan designs. So does that mean that part of the possible recommendation will be having, again, like a high-low or something like where there be some incentives for where the price will be based on the benefits coverage level as opposed to just, I mean, is that what, I just want to understand, what does that mean, choice of health plan designs? Does that mean we're going to move off from other plan, the same design for other plans? Are they HMOs, for example?
Let me pause for a second there. So we already have some differentiation amongst our plan designs currently. So if you think about the PPO portfolio, you have care and choice sitting at a high actuarial level, and then choice and select with a narrower network. And so you've got some differentiation. So that choice, right? That choice is what's driving selection. So,
but they're PPOs though.
Right. But your PPOs are competing with your HMOs in some of your markets. And so you're getting selection amongst the two there as well. So each time you've got two things geographically overlapping. And in some areas, we have 7 plans, 8 plans. All of those are competing against each other for members. And so right now with risk-driven premiums, the competition is really about attracting the healthy lives. And that's what the problem is in the current state. Is that helpful?
Okay. Yes, and I think I found my answer. Was sort of, my question was sort of pinpoints a little bit. So when you say choice of health, I wasn't thinking the PPOs and the competition. So thank you for clarifying that. But my question was on the HMOs, because I always think of HMOs. I don't know why. but they all have different. Currently they all have the same copays.
Yes,
So
they have different network designs.
different network designs. I understand.
Mhm.
So when you say choice of healthcare plan designs, within the HMOs, would there be differences in the copay design or level of coverage, or is it just network changes?
We are not, as part of this project, we are not proposing to change the benefit designs of the HMOs. That could be a separate conversation, but is not part of this project.
No, thank you. No, I just want clarification on that statement.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Ms. Oliveris.
Thank you. Have we ever looked at multi-year rate setting?
We have. The problem that we have with multi-year rate setting is it actually incentivizes higher rates in the first year due to the unpredictability of second-year provider contracts. And so right now, most of our health plans are negotiating provider contracts on a single-year basis. And so they would have to project what that second-year contract would look like, and they're going to project high. So it is something we can continue to consider, but it has a few downsides because the further out from the current year or the current time that you're projecting those healthcare costs, the more incentive there is for the health plans to inflate what that per unit cost may look like.
I've heard that's changing, right? And there can be a different type of structure where you have a multi-year so they can do better financial planning, but then there's some sort of rate lock and you can set a not to exceed. And then for the excess of the not to exceed, you can perhaps have a reinsurance plan come in.
So we are already a not to exceed. So our negotiated rates are not to exceed. So the way our structure works with everybody except for Kaiser, because Kaiser is our only fully insured product, but for everybody else, it is what's called a flex funded product. And so what it is it's a not to exceed, and you build in your capitation is known. So it's a pass through, right? You know exactly what you're going to pay, and your fee for service claims are estimated based on those three factors. So the risk of the membership, the per unit cost, right? All that good stuff, and the geographic.
But if there's an extraordinary event, and
the health,
right?
The health plans are actually on the hook.
But there's sometimes you can have some other type of variable in there where there, again, something completely unforeseen. And in that type of case, then there might be some, either reinsurance could kick in or there's some type of option to adjust, right? So that way the insurers aren't necessarily on the hook for all of it. There is some flexibility, but it's a very remote risk.
Right. It is a remote risk. It just, again, the caution I have is right now we have a hard not to exceed. So if the Blue Cross in the traditional product lost $12 million last year, and we did not lose $12 million last year, they lost the $12 million. And so that not to exceed has been very beneficial to us in a number of settings. So by going to something where we're more sharing the risk as opposed to the health plans retaining all of the risk on the not to exceed, it could be beneficial, but it could also end up being a little bit more expensive than what we're doing right now.
I think we're talking about two different types of not to exceed, right? There's not to exceed in terms of how much we pay, right? That's capped. I get that. But in terms of similar types of plans like Covered California or what we're seeing in other state markets, because the insurers, and they're going to hate me for saying this, so sorry. Sometimes they act like they're in an oligopoly. I don't know, and they come together and they look at rates. But why can't we come together with other pension plans or other, entities that provide this type of service and start to use our bargaining power that way?
So we are starting to collaborate closely with Covered California and the Department of Healthcare Services on data collection, on plan expectations, on a variety of different topics. And so I do see us exerting specific purchasing leverage across the three purchasers. I expect this to be more heavily weighted towards provider costs. So per unit cost, could we negotiate it as a block? Could we say, for example, CalPERS 1.5 million, Covered California 1.4 million. Now we're 2.9 million. Could we put, and I'm going to pick on Sutter, so sorry, we're all picking on somebody today, but could we say, Sutter, do you want our collective business through our carriers? What can you do? This is a big footprint, right? And we could do that with a lot of the high cost carriers. I think it's hard to start to do that sort of collaboration with the risk pool fragmentation that we have right now.
I agree. I think that needs to be fixed. But I did notice that Covered California only had a 0.8% rate increase from 2019 to 2020.
Yes.
0.8, so significantly lower. would we also look, and I think we talked a little bit about this before, but kind of optimizing and ranking the different types of insurance plans and maybe having a third party do that? There are third parties that already do it. So that way it's easier for members to make a selection because it's rather confusing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very interested in network design and network value. There's a lot of really good research out there that can actually pinpoint a specific value on a network based on consumer choice relative to the individual providers in that network and can stack them against each other. So I think there's a lot of really interesting work we could do in that space to make it easier for members to understand exactly what they're getting for their money. I just want to make sure that the pricing that they're seeing is reflective of the value.
Is there anything we can do, just given that we have such a large number of members, to push for more transparency on pricing of medical services? I mentioned this earlier, but I don't know if you're seeing any movement there.
So, we have all the healthcare claims data. So we have access to the pricing data, which is why, I can tell you as an example, a research project I did about 8 months ago that we pay about 35% more in Santa Barbara County for hospital services than we do the statewide average. And
can we publish that? For example, the lowest cost in the state of a particular procedure is X, and the highest cost is Y. Right. And then the average.
So we are doing that. That's that heat map that Dawn talked about on a county basis. So for regional, we absolutely can do that.
So statewide, I mean, just something that people can more easily see, because I think we could be a part of this.
Right. And that's exactly what we want to do with the competition project, is be able to highlight the areas of the state that are disproportionately impacted by high unit cost providers. And that our members are bearing a greater burden of costs relative to those high cost providers. So that is all wrapped up in the competition work that we're doing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mr. Miller.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, just a comment about Ms. Taylor mentioned this notion that the competition doesn't seem to work. But I think it's not that we have evidence that competition doesn't work. I think in many cases, what we think is competition may not be, or what appears to be competition, because you have decisions made on multiple factors, and for many of our constituents, they really don't have viable choices that match up to their needs of their demographic, their location, et cetera. And so we're kind of sometimes thinking that we've got competition between a Tesla and a smart car because they're both electric, but they're really not aimed at the same target audience, and they really don't have the same utility functions. The other thing is, I think sometimes to our stakeholders, and sometimes to me in the past, it has appeared that we did not have real coherence between our strategies and our decisions and our tactics, and that, for a lot of people, it looked like we were intentionally trying to put at least one of our PPOs into a death spiral by introducing another product that clearly would cause migration and adverse selection and all of these things. And so I am really happy with this presentation, and that we're really digging into this discussion and trying to spur some new thinking. And I really appreciate the presentation. I'm really looking forward to seeing the proposals if it's going to go forward, because I think we really need to try to have coherence and congruence with our strategies and our approaches, because we have never made a fundamental decision that says older, sicker people deserve to pay more than younger, healthier people. It's not a snapshot in time, folks. You may be young and healthy today, but you're not going to be maybe in 60 years. And public employees tend to have long tenures. Our members tend to stay active in government for a long time, and we have them as retirees. And so looking at this in a more strategic, more holistic way, I think is a great step in terms of our discussion, our debate, and trying to get our strategies and our tactics more coherent for the long term to serve our constituents.
Yeah. Thank you. I would just like to say, as a third generation CalPERS member, I'm in it for the long haul. So I'm really interested in the long-term stability of this health program.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Middleton.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. I think I got the direction that you're trying to go, and in saying what I'm about to say, I'm not advocating that we go there. But in many respects, if we had simply one plan that everyone was in, so much of this would go away.
Right.
We're not going to go to one plan. But doesn't this truly beg the question that we have provided more options than is necessary or appropriate, and that by reducing the number of options that we can actually come up with a menu of healthier plans in the long run?
I do believe that reducing plan choice could have a positive impact on the risk pool fragmentation. But let me just use a couple of examples. So let's say we decided that our 3 plans, and I'm going to say something controversial, so it's just for illustration purposes. But let's say we decided that the 3 plans that are in the death spiral, we were going to eliminate them and we were going to have those members go elsewhere. That would cause a number of problems. The first is that Anthem Traditional HMO and Blue Shield Access Plus are sometimes the only HMO available in a specific area. So we've then removed their opportunity, those members' opportunity to receive the important consumer protections that you get in an HMO, including the prohibition on surprise balance billing. So it has very negative public policy consequences for those members. In addition, those members, since most of them are on the unhealthier spectrum, get deposited into the other plans. And that risk follows those members into the new plans. And then they become more expensive and may become more unstable. And then the healthy lives in that product start. And so it becomes a waterfall effect of risk migration. And so reducing choice may be appropriate and it may be something that we should consider, but it isn't going to fully solve the problem because, as you saw in Dave's example, even 2 plans can be selected against. And I think it would be unfortunate and potentially challenging if we excluded some of our high-performing regional offerings like SHARP that we just expanded in the San Diego area and Western Health Advantage that have very high member satisfaction rate and low cost. So it's a balancing act, but that's a very long-winded way of saying reducing plan choice may be part of the thing we need to consider, but we also need to think about what the impact of that would be long-term. So when we model, we are going to show you a 5-year model of whatever we propose. So you're not only going to see the impact in the first year, but how it would change over time and how that will impact the membership over time.
Thank you. It's a very good answer, and particularly bringing up a regional organization such as SHARP that plays such a dramatic role in healthcare delivery in the San Diego area. I get that. And we are, as the governor likes to say, a nation state.
Yeah.
You can't necessarily treat every region the same.
Right.
But as we heard in the earlier presentation this morning, we have areas of the state for which competition is not playing
Right.
the role that it should play in the market. And with our purchasing power, we need to find opportunities for us to influence positively that competition. And I will leave it with, after all of the discussions that we have, we are going to have to be able to explain this to the general public in 1, maybe 2 sentences, but absolutely no more than 2. And that is going to be a challenge because, well, I see your head shaking. You understand what the challenge is going to be.
Yeah, having been doing this for 20 years, it's going to be very hard elevator speech.
Okay. Are you finished, Ms. Middleton?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rubalcaba.
Thank you, Mr. President Jones. Ms. Milton sort of spoke to it. this is a big endeavor. And of course, you folks are talking about it, Ms. Middleton mentioned it. We have to make sure that there's a robust member education program so people learn to recognize the quality and the efficiency of the new proposals, the new going forward. And the other comment, or I guess the comment, is we're learning how price is not utilization is what drives the premium cost. But I would still also want us to make sure, because you mentioned the networks, that there still has to be a commitment, I would argue, to treating our chronic population. So, stabilizing them if we can improve them. And, and that's why I really applaud what we did on the PPOs. We're trying to, even though it's a PPO setting, move them to touch base with their primary care physician and that kind of work. So I'm hoping we can couple those two initiatives. So thank you very much.
Okay. Ms. Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Jones. My quick question almost parallels what Ms. Middleton was asking about. How would we explain this to our members? And so I was trying to write out what I thought I heard you say. And so let me see if I could do this in one or two sentences, which is that we're looking at changing our negotiation strategy where this time healthcare providers will provide their services, will price their services without a cost for the risk pool. And instead, the risk pool will be spread among the entire portfolio, or right, and across the entire health providers as like a percent. Is it like a percentage? So they would add that to their number for the entire CalPERS risk pool. Is that right?
So it's close, but it's really about pricing of the plan products, not pricing of the provider reimbursement, right? So provider reimbursement is what it is. If you pay $500 for service X, this is not necessarily renegotiating that $500 for service X, but what it's doing is rating the premiums that the members face in a risk neutral way. So it is assuming that risk is spread evenly amongst all of the plans. So it's now risk neutral, right? So those plans that have unhealthier lives will see a reduction in their premium. Plans with healthier than average lives, those premiums, and it could be phased in over time, will come up. So everybody's premium will be risk neutral. So rated at a 1.
And how do we spread the risk?
Using the risk adjuster models that we're either CMS or HHS or those other publicly available ones, but doing it as a portfolio rating as opposed to a bunch of back-end 4-stage risk transfer processes that are overly complex and lack transparency.
And is that like a cost per life, or what is that?
No, it is simply changing the premium and removing the risk component of the premium.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just make one quick?
Go ahead, Dave.
We just keep bringing up Blue Shield Access Plus. That might be our most efficient plan. We don't know that. It's also one of our most expensive plans. And we might want our bad or our unhealthy risks to be in that plan. So we don't want that plan to go away. So this is one way to not penalize them and to keep them a viable option because, they happen to be the best at treating dialysis or, whatever it is, but they might be our most efficient plan. And we're not,
Right.
And to Dave's point, once you remove the risk component, you can actually look at the cost and make a better assessment of the actual underlying value.
Right.
Where now it's mass based upon the selection against.
Right. So if your benefit designs are identical and you are now risk neutral in your pricing, you can see the relative value of each plan for an average risk neutral life. So right?
No, this sounds exciting. We're going to really see the pricing now. It sounds like. All right. Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Yeah, and thank you. And that elevator speech that Ms. Knowlton made reference to, I'm on that elevator. So
I think we're
I
all going to be on it.
yeah, and to Mrs. Brown's comment about the sausage making, I think we truly need to understand because my concern is that we go back to the previous policy and it was exactly 5 years in operation, and now you're suggesting that this is a 5 year look plan that you would evaluate. But I do like the aspect of coming up with a plan that's going to be evaluated because I think that was missing before, that we didn't have built in some kind of evaluation component. It was just that we kept going. And so if you get early warnings, why keep going? So
Right.
we need to be prepared. If we got early warnings on your evaluation process, we need to change course because the universe hasn't changed. It's the same number of people. It's just that we're moving these criteria around to hopefully the outcome is more healthier members and reduction in costs should be the outcome from all of the input. So I would really like to see this 5 year plan and what targets that you are going to do an evaluation to make decisions going forward. Because it's if something's not working, why continue to do it?
Absolutely.
I think that's what happened the last time. So thank you for the presentation. Are there any other questions from the panel? I don't see any. So we do have a couple of requests from the public to speak, and I'll also alert the members of the public, if you wish to make a public comment, please call in to the meeting at this time and give your name to our screeners so that you can get in the queue. So with that, Mr. Fox.
Yes, Mr. President, we have Joanne Hollander from RPEA.
Time. Good afternoon. Thank you for your time. Here we go. We're going back to risk adjustment, which I'm not surprised. Hopefully there's some new ways of looking at it, that it's more transparent. I know when we went out of it, the problem I see is we still had a death spiral with the PPO basic PERS care. It used over $90 million for 2 years of premiums. And then again, there's an excess uses for the 2021 plan that's being used. And this is just a significant death spiral for this plan. So even taking into account a new risk adjustment plan, I think you really need to address the plans that are just so far overboard. And I understand one of the problems is, and I've been told that this plan is not going to go away, but you know, this plan used excess funds that were mainly from the other PPO basic plans and primarily Medicare contributions that didn't really go back to them. And you know, so we're subsidizing one way or another a plan that really doesn't have really shouldn't have a long life. And one of the big problems is you had a plan that's a 90-10 compared to the 80-20 with PERS choice. So there's no incentive for people that have their premiums paid by their employer, such as most state retirees, to go to another plan when you have a 90-10. So what I am suggesting, because we need to get rid of these really heavy, burdensome plans, is combine that with the PERS choice plan. They're very similar in many ways. I've looked at the comparisons on the chart. So I think it would be reasonable to consider adjusting this plan design and consolidate, to use your word, because I'm not into all the acronyms and whatnot, but to consolidate it so it's viable and it doesn't shove people into a plan that are unhealthy. And the other plans are already taking the hit for this plan anyway. They're already getting risk adjusted for this PPO PERS care plan that I don't see any end to it. And it's not going to get any better. And I've talked to you folks about this before, and I've talked to the staff, but I do think this really does need to be looked at. And even though you do an overall risk mitigation plan, I think this is something very important that needs to get fixed. So thank you for your time. I'll be following you, and I'll be glad to offer suggestions, but good luck in your efforts. Seems like we're just kind of going in a circle, though. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Mr. Fox.
Mr. President, one more caller, Mr. Larry Woodson from California State Retirees. Larry Woodson, California State Retirees. Thank you for the opportunity to comment frequently. First of all, I just want to say that I really appreciate Marta Green's answers and responses to some very tough questions. And she clearly has a grasp of the situation, and I appreciate her expertise, which we've just seen demonstrated. I'm also pleased, I disagree a little bit with the previous comments. I don't think it's a repetition of the same spiral. I do think that looking at risk mitigation tools, including risk adjustment with a different model, makes sense. Hopefully it will ultimately result in breaking the current cycle of plans with high population risk, driving costs up, and then causing migration to lower cost plans, sometimes lower quality, or more restricted choice. Eventually then the high risk members raise the cost of those plans up, the premiums go up, and migration reoccurs. And it's really just a pattern of kicking the can down the road. So I know from hearing from our own members, it's really the older, sicker people that pay the price, not only out of their pocketbooks, but a huge emotional price when they have to migrate, when some of these death spiral plans leave, when Blue Shield left the Bay Area and they publicly stated that it was because risk adjustment was abandoned. That left a lot of folks without not only having to get new plans, but having to find new providers. So I'm very interested to see what a pooled risk adjustment approach could accomplish. And I wish you good luck on it. And I hope to have further discussions and stakeholder briefings on the issue. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Fox, are there any other requests to speak from the public?
Mr. President, no, that concludes public comment for this subject.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, Ms. Green and our panelists, we want to thank you very much for a very productive and engaging conversation. So how about a applause?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's keep moving. We're getting close to the end. We got a strategic plan discussion. Ms. Hutchins, are you ready for us?